What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to another episode of Locked On Badger, special episode crossover with Badger Notes. Dillon, Graff jumping on today. We're going to get into a bunch of questions, comments, listener Q&A, basketball thoughts, football thoughts. I think this is going to be an excellent show, chop up all sorts of Badger topics. And with that, let's get into it. On Wisconsin, let's go.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's going on, everybody? One of the things I want you to do in the comments today, because we're doing a kind of a fan community show, you'll notice on the board behind me, thank you, Gary Anderson. We previously did a show on your unpopular Badgers opinions. That's one of mine. I'll die on that hill. Badger fans do not respect what he did here quite enough. That's mine. Throw yours in the comments. We'll talk about it. Let's bring Dillon Graff on. Badger Notes, excellent website for all sorts of Badger content. Dillon, what's up, my friend?
Hey, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
Always welcome as I adjust my camera and almost knock it off the screen here. I definitely always start this with Dillon. Talk about what you got going on right now and how people can get involved.
Right now, just running badgernotes.com. We got a good team we're putting together right now. We actually just made another edition this week, kind of gearing up right now for football season. Excited to put together a content calendar with my managing editor, Jake Meyer, and kind of get things rolling.
No, that's awesome. I want to start here. So we did a previous show. We're going to get into a bunch of comments. We did a previous show, though, about basketball storylines, underrated storylines. And I talked about one of mine, and this is maybe just a great time to get into it. I think Chucky Hepburn's underrated. I don't think he gets quite enough credit for the type of player he is. And we're going to talk about that in a little bit, too. But I wanted to go to your side. What's an underrated basketball storyline for you this year?
I think it's going to be the fact that, there are so many people that have talked about how they don't feel as if we've improved enough through the portal or what have you. And, much has been made. We returned 92% of our scoring this year. Like, that's huge. But on top of that, like, you do add an AJ Storr, who I think is going to be just a massive, massive addition. And then you include the 2023 class. I think one of the biggest storylines is going to just be the fact that there is legitimate competition at all of the spots in which we were deficient last year. Now, that is not, nobody can sit here and say for sure, what it's going to look like, how much better it will or won't be. But if there's any amount of internal growth, you have people that are pushing at the 5. You got Yalden and Winter, who could both conceivably see the floor this year. Pushing Carter Gilmore, Kamari McGee is going to have Blackwell right behind him. You've got a lot more bodies that are going to be pushing. And ultimately, iron sharpens iron. I think you're going to have a lot better 8-man, 9-man rotation this year. For me, I think it's just going to be competition kind of across the board. You know what you got with your top 6, and then after that, you got a lot of guys that are going to be pushing.
Mm-hmm. I think the depth is a lot better. I agree with that. Brewers and Badgers says Chucky should be amazing with more spacing, not being the number one shot taker. Yeah, I think that was a big issue last year. We've talked about it, right?
Yeah.
A huge amount of the offensive load was on him. I think opening that up, year 2 in Connor is he's going to be a better player. Storr opens things up. And he was an excellent open shot maker. Like, that was a huge skill that he brought to the table, still brings to the table.
Right. He finished second in the Big Ten in 3-point percentage. His assist rate went up. His turnover rate went down last year. He made great strides. It might not have been exactly what everyone was hoping for, but anyone who sits here and thinks that he didn't make a leap last year is out of their mind. And then you add in, like I said, a guy like AJ Storr, and you have him, Klessman, Essegian around him. You've got 4 guys that are all north of 36% 3-point shooters. It's a pretty good place to start. I think he's going to have a much improved junior season because of the pieces around him.
How about Tyler Wahl? He says, I'm a believer in Wahl this season.
As far as Tyler Wahl, this might seem like a cop-out answer, but I would say I would expect him to kind of split the difference. I don't necessarily think he's going to convert at the clip he did 2 years ago when he first entered the starting lineup full time. But I also don't think that he's as inefficient as he was last year. If he can kind of regress to somewhere in the middle, I think that's a really, really useful player when you talk about everything else he brings to the table.
Let's go back to underrated storylines. So we talked about, you and I both had kind of a good one. You talked about the improved depth, the iron sharpens iron. I've talked about Chucky Hepburn. What's a scary underrated storyline that you don't think maybe Badger fans are fretting about enough? I'm putting you on the spot here, but I haven't thought about this either.
Yeah. I ultimately think it's, for the record, everyone knows how I feel about Gus Yalden. I wholeheartedly believe he's going to step in and be able to be the backup 5. However, if he or Nolan Winter are not as game ready, it would be Carter Gilmore that would have to fill in as the 5 again. And I think it's a very real possibility. I mean, you never know for sure how a freshman is going to translate, and especially bigs tend to take a little bit longer before they're able to, log heavy minutes. And I guess in the event that one of those freshmen is not game ready, that we would have to run it back with Gilmore at the 5. And I think again, many people know where I stand on him as well. He does a lot of things well, but offensively it's 4-on-5. And I think you'd like better than that. We have the bodies, but if they're not ready, you're going to have Gilmore starting, or, as our preferred option off the bench again.
Are we completely out on the idea that it could be an Ilver or a Hodges? And I agree with you on Yalden, by the way. I've talked about this. I think Yalden's going to play. I think he's going to be a really good player this year, given his freshman status. But let's go with the hypothetical that for whatever reason he's not ready. Is it automatically Gilmore, or could it be Ilver or Hodges in there?
For me, it would have to be Gilmore. I mean, just the things he does well, he does them extremely well. The hustle, the low post defense. I'm not a Chris Hodges guy. I don't really believe in his game. I don't see a lot of fluidity there, and it doesn't mean he can't take a big step, but personally, I'm out on him. I have little to no expectations there. Ilver, I think that there are things that you can like about him, and I think that like a 95th percentile outcome at this point would him becoming like a Duye Dukin type player for Wisconsin, which would be great. A stretch big, but just defensively, and he looked really outmatched when he was on the floor, specifically on the boards. So if he comes back bigger, you can never rule anything out. But I just think ultimately defense and ball security is what's going to get you on the floor. And those are two things that Carter Gilmore does exceptionally well. So I think Ilver would have to make a really unforeseen leap to overtake him.
Let me give you my underrated scary storyline that I don't necessarily think this is super likely, but I think there's still a possibility. We have to see what AJ Storr is in Madison in year 2 for his college career. I think there still might be a possibility this team lacks somebody who can break down a defense and get a tough bucket. Like, I still don't know if I don't think it's going to be Connor to be honest. I don't know if that's going to be Chucky. I don't think that's fully his game. And let's say Storr is more of a slashing athletic wing that excels in transition. That might not be his game either.
Right. I mean, it was an incredibly small sample size. I mean, according to Synergy, he was like a 92nd percentile one-on-one player in college basketball last year. However, it was not at a large sample. He didn't have a crazy amount of shot attempts, so it's not fair to call him that. But I mean, it's entirely possible, and hopefully they're able to mitigate that just a little bit by pushing the pace some, like they did with Johnny, his sophomore year. They were somewhere in the 270s in tempo, by Ken Pom. But if they could get back to that does alleviate some of those needs when you have a couple athletes that you can get out and push with.
Tim Olson says, let's talk football, not basketball. Grumpy emoticon. Listen, we got both on this show. Tim, we got both. I promise you. We got football coming up too. Gabe Ramos says, I agree. Connor Essegian doesn't receive much attention regarding his potential to make a huge jump in his sophomore year. I hope he improves his shot selection, becomes more capable on defense. See, I love this storyline, and that's a great point from Gabe, because I don't think people realize how much growth Connor could still have in him. Like that, the version of Connor last year, he was just, he wasn't as physical as he's going to be. I think he's going to be more skilled. He's got to improve the handle, but all of that happens to players going from the freshman to sophomore year all over college basketball. And if he does those things, the ceiling on Connor is huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I've had a lot of people that have been trying to convince me that he doesn't have a high ceiling, and I think they're basing that off his athletic limitations, but what you don't realize is how successful he was last year, despite, like you said, he didn't have a particularly great handle. It wasn't like he was creating for himself. There's a lot of aspects of his game that he can clean up. He can put on another 10, 15 pounds. That'll help with conditioning. His legs will be there at the end of the year. I mean, having other people that can log minutes that will allow him, a little bit of time to breathe, all of those things are going to play a role in him getting better. And if he can start creating his own shot, even just a little bit with the quick trigger he has, he doesn't need a lot of separation. I think most of the things will come down to, can he put on a little bit of weight? And with that, he should improve a little bit defensively. He was he was a black hole on defense. Sometimes teams targeted him a lot, but there's a lot he can do to improve. And I really do think that he's probably in line for one of the largest jumps, because I think in most years he wouldn't have been counted on for as heavy of a role as he was as a true freshman.
Yeah, I agree with that. We're going to take a quick break here. Coming up, we got a bunch more basketball, football comments. We're talking a little Luke Fickell still. We have a random comment about Joel Stave and his knee down at Arizona State and what other plays that reminds us of in Wisconsin backstory. So a bunch more coming up, but we got to take a quick break coming in with our friends of the show over at eBay Motors. But first, I really do want to appreciate saying thank you to Dillon for jumping on, for everybody else for jumping on these live chats. They're a lot of fun, and we really do appreciate it. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player, and this is what we're talking about with the Badgers, every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head over to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage. Look for the green check to know the part will fit, and that's it. No more fumbling around trying to figure out if this part will fit to this car. eBay's taken all the guesswork out of that. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game. And when you shop on eBay Motors, that's what you'll have. With over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easier to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers, eligible items only, and exclusions to apply. I do want to say thank you again to everybody tuning in. Thank you to Gary Anderson for all the great things he did in Madison for the Badgers. Again, that is my unpopular opinion. Throw yours in the comments. We'll talk about it. Dillon, what is your unpopular opinion? You've seen mine.
I mean, if you just check my my Twitter comment section, it's probably anything I say positive about Greg Gard. You know, the haters come out in full force and the pitchforks are out whenever I have anything positive to say about him. So maybe just being a supporter of Greg, that's probably one of my bigger ones.
Yeah, listen, we've both been there. Let's keep going here. I want to continue talking Connor Essegian and his basketball team a little bit. Is there another? I think one of the things that gets talked about with this team, and I think it's one of the things that people kind of have a hard time seeing this team take the next jump with, is outside of maybe Connor, right? Are there a lot of players that you see internal growth for? Like, I don't know if there's another gear for a Crowell, a Wahl, a Hepburn, a Klesmit. I want to throw that over to you, though. And am I wrong on that?
So the player that I think I see the largest window for growth in would, for me, be Crowell. And it's not because I think all of a sudden he's going to look like a completely different player, you know, all of a sudden be able to put it on the deck like Frank or anything like that. I think for him, it all comes down to consistency. I mean, look at last year when Wahl went down with injury and Steven Crowell was relied on as a dude. He was averaging 17 points a game during his absence. And obviously that was not, the team was not playing well, but we saw what a confident Steven Crowell could do. And he's the best passer on the team.
Mm-hmm.
He's someone who I think has the largest ability to help the team win because they're able to facilitate so much of the offense through him. And if he plays with confidence, I've said it over and over, Steve can figure out that he's really good. If he can believe that he's really good and have that confidence night in and night out, I think there's plenty of room for growth. And it might not come in a major way statistically, but it can just come from a consistency standpoint and not having nights off. I'll happily trade 20 points one night, 8 points another night for 14 points a game steadily and being a force down low. I'm not sitting here saying that that's a guarantee, but you know, the NIT run certainly did something for him. And he saw in stretches last year that he can be an enforcer. He can be somebody who dictates the pace of the game a little bit. And I'm confident in his ability to pass. So I think there is room for him.
This one's from Cory. Chucky, Connor, Wahl, Crowell having another offseason to mesh is his underrated storyline. That's Absolutely. A great one.
Continuity is everything in college basketball, and in the transfer portal era, that's even harder to come by. And the fact that we lost just Jordan Davis this offseason it's huge. Honestly, not that we lost Jordan, but the fact that we only lost one player. You know, we brought back the rest of the team. We were able to bring in a nice addition there. Continuity is going to be key, and I think it will go a long way. And I'm glad that they were able to finish the season on a semi-positive note to kind of erase some of the negativity there was from missing the tournament.
Yeah, and I'd throw Klesmit in there as well. I know Dillon said, without saying his name, but yeah, he's back as well. And with Connor and Klesmit, you had two guys the first year in the system. So those jumps could potentially be even bigger a second year in the system. I just think Again, man, I think this team is really going to surprise people, Dylan. I try not to be too much of a homer. I know at times I am, but
It's hard not to be a little bit.
I like the talent. I like the depth. I think this team's going to be really good. And by really good, I don't mean I don't think we're winning the Big Ten, but I think a top 4 or 5 finish in the Big Ten is very, very possible. I don't think
Yeah,
that's
that's exactly where I have them. I was talking to my buddy Coop this afternoon, and I had said, for me, the bar is think they're capable of shooting for that double bye. And in a tough conference like the Big Ten, that means you're a team. That means you are a really, really good team. And I think that's entirely possible this year. I would say I probably got them in that 4 to 6 range, but capability of going maybe even a little bit higher.
Mm-hmm. Let's get some more of these questions in here. And now we're going to get a few football ones too, because I'm just taking these questions as we get them. Zach Bart says, I feel Dominic Nichols decommits. That's a big defensive end that the Badgers were in on. Decommits from Michigan, but with his Clemson visit, I'm split between us and Clemson. Do you have any gut feel on Dominic Nichols? Are you holding out hope there?
So somebody had shared with me that they had heard that Wisconsin is not taking the gas pedal off in his pursuit, even though he has committed to Michigan. Obviously, they have 8 defensive line commits right now, which is insane. However, there's no indication, at least especially this early, that he's looking over his shoulder at anything else. But Wisconsin is not willing to back off of him. I mean, there's a lot of time between now and National Signing Day, so that's one that right now I can't say one way or another what I think will happen. He's given no indication that his commit is anything other than solid, but there's a lot of bodies there, and you have to imagine a couple in that class are going to start looking.
Well, and we know too how recruiting works now, right? Like we've seen it with teams are now reaching out to Darian Dupree, right? Darian Dupree, Dillon Jones, both these guys are in the same class, and teams are like, hey, that's a little competition. I don't know, man. That teams are going to continue to reach out for Nichols, considering how deep Michigan is at that spot. And
absolutely,
usually when there's smoke with this stuff, when people are wondering, hey, we're hearing something, this guy's liking something on Twitter, a lot of times in recruiting, that's the first step of somebody decommitting, making a move. I want to continue defensive line here. This is a question I had talked to, I think maybe Justin about. I would love your take on it, Dylan. Dillon Johnson in the fold, Hank Weber in the fold. Those 2 players get sold as kind of a high floor, low upside. Whether it's fair or not, that's kind of the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Do those players raise the room for you, or are they more the same?
They don't raise the room for me. There's plenty I like about Dillon Johnson. I think he's got potential to, be an above average defensive lineman, somebody who does a really nice job on the interior. I actually, I like him quite a bit. But when right now he's your best defensive line recruit, I'm a little bit less impressed. Like Hank Weber is, to me, seems like a high floor guy. There's not a lot on his tape that really jumps out at me. Seeing somebody who could be a real game wrecker, and later this week I'll have my defensive line preview coming out, but there's actually not a lot in the pipeline kind of beyond the guys who are going to be rotating this year right now to be super excited about. And I guess I just don't see anything real earth shattering coming up just yet.
Is that the biggest question mark position on the team for you?
I think it is, honestly. I think you've got a room of, it's funny. I was actually just looking at like all of the information on the defensive line today for what I was writing, and really, there's not a lot. We don't have anyone really above average. Like Isaiah Mullins is the definition of a jag, but in a good way, like a starter. That he's not a net neutral, or he's mostly a net neutral. And Rodis Johnson is someone who I think has potential to be a little bit more than that, but didn't really grade out particularly well as a pass rusher or a run defender. And James Thompson Jr. is somebody who I think, flashed a little bit, and I am definitely intrigued by. He actually showed pretty well and even graded well at both run defense and pass rushing. So there's a little bit of something there. Varner's an unknown who I'm really excited about. I think he's super intriguing, and Tressel has traditionally got after it pass rushing with his defensive linemen. Just don't think we have a lot of those guys right now. So I don't know, really, really interested to see kind of how it shakes out. Hope I'm wrong. Hope that there are a few guys that make a big leap, but right now I just don't see a lot of guys that are game changers. I think there are plenty of guys that are serviceable and can see the field though.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on it. It's weird. The defensive line, I think you can make the case that it's I hesitate. I hate using the word weakest, but just the biggest question mark maybe for this year's team. And it's also the spot you look at and you have the biggest struggle finding future playmakers, right?
Right.
To what you're saying. That's a scary combination considering the importance of the defense line. And people will continue to say, well, a defensive line can just eat up blocks. And listen, that not on the best teams. That's not how it works.
No, that's absolutely the difference between, kind of where we're at and where we want to go. I kind of mentioned to you before, I kind of went back and was looking at some of the blue blood programs, and the Wisconsin's had 2 4-star defensive line commits since 2016, and the blue blood programs have had 2 or more commits per cycle each year. And I mean, the defensive line is the difference. You can't have just one Keanu Benton on a defensive line and have that get you through. You need a line full of Keanu Bentons. I mean, you've got early round draft picks coming out of all these teams. Clemson has done it well. Michigan's done it well. Bama. I mean, these guys are all they're funneling in, and that's kind of right now where we need to make one of the biggest jumps if we're going to start closing that gap.
Well, and this is what I rib Rajiv about, because obviously Believe with Rajiv is an icon here. But he thinks we're winning a title in the next 10 years, right? Which I'm not saying we can't do that. I don't think that's an impossibility. Mm-hmm. I don't think it'll happen, but I don't think it's a possibility. But what I tell him is you better get multiple 4-star defensive linemen, because he keeps saying, and again, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he'll say, we're going to be the next Clemson. I said, well, the next Clemson didn't just become the next Clemson because they upgraded the quarterback play, which we have now done. They did that plus getting elite defensive line play. And you mentioned that you can't just have one Keanu Benton. Well, even a line of Keanu Bentons isn't what Clemson has been doing. They have first-round picks, top 10 picks.
And that's got to be the biggest differentiator, is we have to turn into a place that, does hit on a couple more unheralded guys and get them to the league, because that's how you start landing those guys. And I mean, it's not something that happens overnight. You can obviously recruit your ass off, get a couple guys that are higher caliber, but until you start putting guys in the league on a consistent basis, that's where things change.
Here's one beach bum. Again, we're just shifting all around because I want a lot of this show to be user community. He says, saw today Jackson McAndrews leaning either Notre Dame or Creighton. Thoughts? Dillon would probably have a better feel on this than I would. I can say the last I had heard that he was leaning Wisconsin is what I had heard. But Dillon, any insight that you're able to share with us? I know not everything you're able to share.
Yeah. Right now, kind of the last that information that I had been privy to was that he was leaning Creighton for quite some time, but Freitag committing to Wisconsin, obviously changed things. And when he took his official, Jackson came with on an unofficial visit, and the last that I had heard, that's where things changed a little bit. And I guess I'll just kind of leave it at that. I don't think that I would put Wisconsin in that top 2 somewhere, save for whoever else you choose. But I would not leave Wisconsin out of that final 2 there.
Can we talk about his game a little bit? Because
Absolutely.
Again, I still think he gets overshadowed by Con, which is understandable given Con's ranking and ability in state. What about Jackson McAndrew are Badger fans not as excited about as they should be?
Yeah, so one of the cool things about Jackson McAndrew, and he's been an absolute pleasure to cover. Like he's just a class act, like really, really good human being, the kind of person that is really easy to root for. When I started communicate with him a couple of years ago, he came off a season in high school where he averaged 5 points a game. And when the Badgers invited him to team camp, he was a relative unknown, and the guy is just an absolute sniper from beyond the arc. Like he can create his own shot a little bit. Like he can put it on the deck. He physically, in the last calendar year, he has matured so much that if he is able to take even a similar leap like that physically from his junior to senior year, the kid is going to be, gosh, he has like NBA ceiling. I'll leave it at that. It's not like he is a freak athlete by any means, but he reminds me of, maybe like Lure, and just the way that like he runs the floor, and he's a fluid athlete. Like he's not just a string bean that can shoot at 6'8". Like, no, he's athletic. He has some intangibles. I'm a really big fan of his game. And when teams started getting in on his recruitment, they were just betting on the physical maturation that had a long way to go to catch up. And, now that part is catching up with his game, his confidence is starting to blossom. And before he named his Final Four schools here, there were some blue blood programs that were beginning to have conversation with him. So this is a guy who went from unranked when Wisconsin began their conversations with him and offered him a scholarship. And now he's a budding top 100, depends on what recruiting sites you prefer to look at, but he's essentially a top 100 national recruit. He's put in the work, and he's starting to shine. Really cool to see.
The other thing that I like about this, when you look at, because it's not just talent, right, in basketball that wins. It's system, it's fits, it's coaching, it's a lot of things. What Gard has done with these recruiting fits is they've put a lot of people together that play off each other. They're going to potentially play off each other really well, right? There's a ton of shooting, a lot of IQ, a lot of good passers. You have inside-outside threats coming in with Winter and Yalden. It's shooting again everywhere on the court. And now Daniel Freitag is a guy who can get inside and orchestrate. And it feels like they're building a potential great offensive team here.
I couldn't agree more. Ironically enough, given what we're talking about, I've always said the reason I enjoy watching Creighton basketball so much is they run a lot of the same stuff Wisconsin does, but they do it faster. And I kind of think that's what Wisconsin in a lot of ways wants to emulate. They're never going to just throw caution to the wind and say forget what's happened the last 20 years. They're gonna do what's made them unique. But I think that they want the flexibility of being a team that can get up and run a little bit, and when they have that many scorers on the floor, that many people that can stretch the floor and play the game that they want to. I think that there's a slightly different brand of basketball that's kind of on the horizon, and that's definitely something that they're pitching to recruits.
By the way, for those listening on the podcast, you should see Dillon's face light up when I talk about shooting, spacing, offensive execution. It's potentially going to be a lot of fun here in Madison. This is from Danimal 1965. He says in a 3-3-5, which is nominally the defense, we're going to be running different variations of it, but the D coordinator will slant the defense line into gaps. With that type of tactic, you don't necessarily need top shelf studs. I'll just say this is where I've always pushed back, because we had this similar discussion with when we were running Leonard's version of the 3-4, and people would say we were just eating up blocks. Listen, no defensive line coach says just eat up blocks if the defensive lineman is able to beat those blocks and create havoc.
Right. If you can be more, they're always going to ask that of you, and you're going to scheme around that ability. Like you're not just going to have yourself a Keanu Benton and say, hey, I know that you can get after the quarterback, but actually we're just going to have you eat up blocks for the linebackers. Like, I understand what you're saying. I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It's an entirely fair point that I think, Wisconsin for many years has gotten by making the most of what they have and finding ways to free up the playmakers that they do have. But to raise the ceiling of this program, in specifically a 3-3-5 scheme, your defensive linemen are utilized as your pass rushers almost always. I mean, some of the charting is insane. It's like 85% of the time and higher, they're being used as a pass rusher. And so in a perfect world, that's not going to be an Isaiah Mullins anymore, so it is going to take a little bit higher level of athlete. And I'm not real concerned about their ability, Wisconsin's ability to, continue to find playmakers at linebacker. But as soon as we can mesh some athletes up front, I think that's where we'll see one of the biggest leaps overall as a program.
Yeah, I think we just both kind of hit on it, but I think it's been coaching around a talent deficiency where you've used those guys to clog up and eat up blocks. But imagine if you had disruptors on the defense line with the linebackers that we've had. That's when your defense, because again, like the defense has been incredible. Don't mistake it. But when we play teams that can really hook the ball and we can't get to the quarterback, that's where those defensive linemen come into play. That's how you hang with an Ohio State or a Clemson or a Georgia. I want to throw this comment out here, and Dillon, let me know if you have anything you want to throw out here too. I know I didn't really give you a fair chance on that one, but this is a great comment from 94 Buckethead. Said Joel Stave's knee was down against Arizona State, and it got me thinking. Yes, damn right. It got me thinking though. What's another just completely? And in the comments, let us know. Random, oddball, out of nowhere Wisconsin play that still ticks you off, or you still find unique joy in that nobody outside the Wisconsin fan base would know of.
In a positive way or a negative way?
Positive or negative, yeah. I've got one of each, but positive or negative.
In the net, there's two negative ones, one each sport that really stick out to me that I feel like I have a hard time letting go of. The first is Kirk Cousins' Hail Mary against Wisconsin in 2011. I'll say this over and over and over. He doesn't get in the end zone. I firmly believe Wisconsin at least appears in the BCS national title game. And obviously that was a roster to do it offensively. That team don't need to rehash it. That's one that sticks with me. for me, I'm a guy who heartbreak sticks with harder than a lot of the bigger moments. And so for basketball, for me, it's Chioza hitting that floater 3 to bury Wisconsin, because that would have been an Elite Eight. I mean, how different the narrative is just, I don't know. Those are just a couple where as time expires, if the ball falls a different way, there's just a lot of different storylines, I guess, a lot of different memories that could have been made.
Let me give you a good one then. Let's balance this out. How about Monte Ball's breakout touchdown against Iowa? Right, he's third string running back. White gets hurt. I think Clay gets hurt. Right, and then Ball comes in. He has that play. There's a fly buzzing me here. Ball comes in. He has that play where he carries an Iowa defender, reaches over, and like that's super risky in that situation. Reaches over though, gets the touchdown. They review it. We hold on. JJ Watt gets a tackle at the end. Iowa runs out of time. Yeah, that was always to me the tipping point of Ball's career. Because if people remember, prior to that, he wasn't getting burned. He was a little overweight. They were talking about this guy might be a linebacker. Let's maybe shift him. This is a guy who had 39 touchdowns. That was almost never happened.
Turns out he knew how to football just fine.
Yes, it's so weird how this stuff works. Let's keep going here. Victor Jones, Jazz PV touchdown.
Yeah,
he got that.
No doubt. Well, honestly, another, if I'm trying to be positive, would be the same season, I guess, but Russ Wilson hucking one up to Duckworth. And I mean, shortly after that, walking down, scoring the touchdown, winning the Big Ten title. That was just a prayer. I mean, I don't care what anyone involved said. That was a prayer. And, the Lord decided it was our day.
Listen, you're not throwing a jump ball to Duckworth if it's not a prayer. Like, that's not in the game plan. Like, they're not pregame in Michigan State being like, oh, it's the no-fly zone. Let's get Duckworth down there and Hail Mary it up to him. That's what we're going to do. Here's another one. This one, you all remember when we played Cal Poly? The famous Cal Poly football game where we won by 1 point because their kicker couldn't make an extra point?
Yeah.
And I remember their kicker missed that extra point. I think we blocked it. I'm pulling it out of the memory banks here, but he missed the extra point. And I remember the Wisconsin players just jumping around like they won a bowl game. And it panned to the crowd, and someone in the crowd's like, "This was Cal Poly. They dropped 44 on us. I think it was 45-44. It was absolutely insane."
I was at a Utah State game once at Camp Randall that we damn near lost till Kenzel Doe brought in a punt return touchdown that had potential to get real ugly.
This is a great topic, man. You have the Starks. So some of these here, Schaber, Lee Evans, right, in the game against Ohio State. Let's see here. We had the Crookshank kick return in the Rose Bowl from Jake Meyer. Jake Meyer. Is it Meyer or Meyer? It's Meyer.
Yeah.
Okay. That was an incredible play, highlighting everything Crookshank could bring. So there's a lot of stuff, man. Austin Ramish hurling a Miami defensive back in the Orange Bowl. That was a fun game too.
R.I.P. the fullback.
Yeah. Let's shift gears here. This is great. John Berger says O'Brien Schofield, J.J. Watt, Tom Burke, Erasmus James, Alec James, etc. All of these players either unranked are walk-ons, 3-star. And again, I think we're shifting that narrative though, right? Like it's you have to get more talent in the door because those feel like exceptions. Those don't feel like the norm to me.
Yeah, I would tend to agree with that. I mean, obviously that we have plenty of success stories, unheralded players at all sorts of positions that have turned out, and nobody's discrediting what that we've done as a developmental program. It's just at some point we gotta do more with more.
Yeah. Here's a great one too. Someone mentioned Jay Valai. You remember Jay Valai knocking the gopher off the helmet? Mertz's first game. Yeah, the 5-touchdown Illinois game.
My buddy Coop and I watched that this afternoon. Watched the highlight. Yeah, we were talking about, when was a game, like just an outlier game that had you fooled. And, Pat Mahomes was tweeting about that one. Mertz got us all with that game.
Going back and looking at that, it's fascinating to me that you just rewatched that. Was there anything in that now that you've seen how Mertz progressed, you could say, yeah, in that game, you were like, oh, I can see it now?
So not really, because what was the most confusing to me is Mertz's footwork was never, to me, that was one of the biggest things that held him back because it didn't allow him to act on reads quick enough. And in that game, his feet were planted. His footwork was pristine. Like, I don't know if his first read was just there every time or what the case was, but his footwork was so good and he was just on platform and there was so much more arm strength. I I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. Maybe it was just the perfect night, perfect game plan.
Well,
Not having any tape out there. I don't know.
That was a horrific Illinois defense for starters. Like, that was a really bad team that they played. But yeah, it's incredible. Listen, a lot of quarterbacks play really bad teams and don't throw for 5 touchdowns and look almost perfect. So there was more than just Illinois going on there.
Yeah, that was a tough one.
Let's see. We got a couple more here quick. Let's see. We had the Justice Winslow. I lost the comment, but Winslow touched it.
Yeah, that'll probably haunt me for the rest of my life.
Yep. Grayson Allen throwing his head down and getting calls at will from Daltrey. Let's get off that game.
This got a chance to get dark real quick.
I thought we'd have an equal amount of positive and negative, but you're right. The negative stuff hurts more. It just does. Gabe Ramos says the implement of NIL narratives like Varsity Collective actually seem to be helping Gard. I originally thought it would be the opposite. I think this is a really interesting point. I think most people thought Greg Gard would get swallowed up in this type of ecosystem, right? With NIL, with Varsity Collective, because other programs can sell that better, because other coaches, quite frankly, other coaches are more of a salesman personality than Gard is. It just is what it is. It seems to have shifted a little bit, and I still think a lot of this comes down to McIntosh implementing a bit of a culture shift here that is impacting everything.
Yeah, I definitely agree, and something that like I've started to jot down some of my thoughts on it, and once I kind of see it through all the way, I'll put it out there. But one of the most interesting narratives to follow over the next maybe 2 years, in terms of Greg Gard's recruiting ability, to me is in this transfer portal world. This year is actually the first year that transfer players are projected to score more points than players who were recruited from day one to play for that program in Division I basketball. So at this point, transfers, are such a hot commodity. And I read a really, really good article that talked about how Jan Calipari said right now the players that are hurting most are the 4-star recruits, said, because they are not an immediate upgrade over the players that I have available to me. And if they don't offer me an immediate upgrade, I'm not looking at them. So I'm looking at 5 stars, and I'm looking to the portal because I can get a 22-year-old that I know can help me right now, instead of the lottery ticket that is, the regular recruits. And which it makes a ton of sense to me. He said you can put in 2 years on a 4-star kid that there's no guarantees with, where I can put in one week of hard recruiting and I can land a kid who maybe is more talented and established and developed, than the high school kid. He said it's a bad return on investment. And that, I thought that was a really unique way of looking at it. Obviously that doesn't fit how Wisconsin has traditionally done business, but how will that affect how Greg Gard does business moving forward? Will he thrive? Will he be able to get a couple more people in that 4-star range, a Freitag, McAndrew? Like, can he land more players of that caliber because they are not getting the same blue blood interests that they were before? Because ultimately those are the culture building pieces of any college basketball program. The transfer portal kids are the ones who accentuate that. Is Greg Gard going to be able to thrive in that capacity and kind of living in that range and be able to bring in more talent? Or will his, potential inability to land, the highest caliber athletes in the portal, will that hold him back? So, obviously Storr was a terrific addition. But that's 1 year, where he went out and decided we need to get a difference making player, not just a kind of a niche role guy. Just there's a lot of different angles, and I think all Division I coaches are figuring it out right now for the first time, and kind of throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. But that's just a really interesting narrative that I'm going to be following moving forward, and kind of seeing how that specifically affects Wisconsin.
I think it's a fascinating take from Calipari. I hadn't heard that, because that is going to potentially push more of the 4-star guys down into the programs, not just like Wisconsin. Well, Wisconsin like Wisconsin. And that's where Gard is going to make hay. We're not going to get the 5-star.
Right. Calipari was the only head coach in that article that went on record. Everyone else was Big 10 coach, Big 12 coach. Calipari didn't care. He just laid it out there.
I love Calipari.
I do too.
He's an ego manager, which is one of the most underrated parts of coaching. I really like Calipari. Bo Dragon says, will Greg Gard thrive? Ha, 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 ha.
Bo, thanks for making it out. You're a big fan.
Always love Bo, man. I want to come back up here. This was from Marty Griffin. Do you think, and we just kind of touched on this, so let's skip the NIL maybe partially to this, but do you think Gard, he says Hard, but he meant Gard, obviously. Has Gard changed his recruiting philosophy? Do you think he's cast maybe a wider net?
I ultimately don't think so. I think that's been one of my criticisms, is that I think he needs to cast a wider net and, kind of have those plan B guys a little bit closer. He's one of the only Power 5 coaches in the July evaluation period not to extend a scholarship offer to anyone. So, I mean, there's obviously a lot that'll follow, but I don't think he's changed his recruiting philosophy all that much. I just think he's trying to reach a higher level talent, which, I mean, I think is ultimately always going to be the goal. But I think he's having more success because now at least he has somebody who we put in the league. He doesn't have any one and dones to point to, but he's got a 2 and through that developed a long way. And I think those become easier selling points. So I think he's just kind of entering conversations for just a slightly higher caliber athlete.
Okay. Let's finish up on this because I've already kept you for 40 minutes. All the comments we don't get to, we'll try to wrap them up. We'll do another show. And again, if we don't get to all the comments, it's usually my fault for not managing time very well. And we could do this for hours, by the way. I just don't know how much. I don't want to take anybody's time too much. This is a comment from, I want to throw this in from Timothy Palm. And his comments talking about Emerson, Mandel, Heiberger being upgraded 4 stars. I wanted to take this and flip it a little bit. And Timothy, thank you for the comment because this got me my thinking on this. Who's the most underrated football prospect you think we have in this class? Not even from a ranking standpoint, but from a factor it all in, hype, ranking, whatever it is. Who isn't getting talked about enough?
I guess there's 2 that immediately jump to my mind. The first would probably be Kyan Barry Johnson. Obviously there's a lot of guys on the depth chart now that, bring a certain shiftiness and dynamic that we didn't have out of the slot before. So it's not like he's probably going to be able to, from day one, come in and make an impact. But I just continue to be impressed with him and have to imagine that a ratings boost is going to come along with it. He plays a lot bigger than his size. He's just, I'm very impressed with his film. I'm excited to see kind of how that what he looks like senior year. And then Ryan Cory is somebody who, maybe not as flashy, but I mean, as a guard prospect, I think we've had a lot of tackles playing guard the last few years. I think he's kind of right in the sweet spot in terms of like height, weight, put a little bit more on him, but I think he's got some nasty to him. I enjoy his game. I think he's someone who I could definitely see down, 2-3 years down the road being a guy.
Yeah, Corey's one of mine. I love his game. I love his film. I think
just really, really solid. I mean, obviously guards aren't exactly at the top of the list to get big rating boosts, but definitely like his tape.
The thing of it is though, and he gets the knocked for the same reason. Let's see. I'm trying to think of an equivalent somewhere else. He gets knocked the same reason, maybe I don't know. I'm struggling to find the perfect comparison in my head, but when people say he's just going to be an interior offensive lineman, he's just going to be a guard, right? And people say, well, that's probably an 86, 87 on the scale then. But you need 2 guards, just like you need 2 tackles, right? Like, absolutely. And a great guard in Longo's system, where we're going to be running a lot of pin pull, we're going to be running inside power zone. Like, a great guard is instrumental to what Phil Longo's going to want to do. And Corey's film is great. He's well built. He moves really well. I love his film. I think he's a 4-star player. He's just a guard.
Yeah, the offensive line class that we have coming in, I'm definitely very pleased with, and I was super intrigued just to see what their first class was going to look like. I mean, obviously, like you said, we're implementing an entirely new system. The pace is different. I mean, just everything that we're doing is different than what it's been. And I was just curious kind of what body types, are they going to be? What's their preference? We don't know their preferences yet. Wisconsin, we kind of, or, previously, like with Paul Christ, we knew more or less what they were going to have. And now we got a guy like Emerson Mandel, who I love his tape. Like I think he could play tackle if he needed to, if you wanted him out there. But I think he's got potential to be an elite guard. I don't know, just very, very pleased with what they've done and the athletes that they've been able to bring in the position.
Yeah, I think it's a really good first year offensive line class, especially coming off some of the in-state misses that people were, self included, were questioning. Zach Bart says Mentor feels should be higher than his borderline 3-4 star ranking. I agree there. Rivals all over with him, though.
Very, very high on his future.
Yeah. One more. Here's one more that, and this was mentioned in the comment that I originally referenced from Timothy Palm. I think Heiberger is a guy people should be a little more excited about, just because he could completely bust, right? Like, it's possible he's playing terrible competition. There are just not many, forget football players, Dillon. Forget football players. Forget basketball players. There are not many human beings walking the planet that are 6'4" with the 39-inch vertical. I talked to the head coach, like, he's jumping. That's an NBA vertical on a 6'4" outside linebacker.
Yeah.
And the story with the Texas Tech coach had him stand in the doorway. So they just took a picture of his arms, and then they saw film of him just running a few combine type drills, and said, yes, offered. That's it.
That's the thing. I mean, you drop this kid down in Florida, like there's no chance he's not already got a 4-star label. Like, I mean, it's based on just upside, because that's what you're betting on. Wisconsin is getting a kid with the intangibles that the Ohio States, the Alabamas are after. You know, he's got the vertical, the 40. I mean, I'm pretty sure he runs a 4.6 to go along with 40-inch vertical. He's all of the tools.
Yes.
Nobody can sit here and say anything definitive about what you think someone will be. However, on a projection end, his ceiling is as high as it could possibly be because of all the intangibles that come with it. And if he was located almost anywhere other than where he lives, odds are more schools would have come knocking sooner.
Bo says, do linebackers jump around the field? Yeah, they do in passing lanes, Bo. Stop trying to troll me. Yes. Are they playing Frogger? Bo asks. No. Listen, they get in passing lanes, right? But the thing is, vertical, I was talking about one of the high school coaches last year, and vertical, the shuttle, those are all just explosive metrics, right? They're measures of explosiveness. And if you have a 40-inch vertical, you are an explosive athlete. That's really the more important thing. I mess around about getting in passing lanes, which is also important, but that's an explosive athlete, and the type
Absolutely.
that in 4 years, right? Mel Kiper, I'm not projecting anything here, by the way, but Mel Kiper is going to read some bio of some linebacker that's a top 20 pick. He's going to say 38-inch vertical, big frame. That's who gets picked in the first round of the NFL. Guys with that type of measurable.
Things you can't teach.
That's it. All right, we're going to wrap it up there, man. We are at 46 minutes. I feel like we could. Robert Sorensen agrees with me. They need to explode off the line, get up the quarterback. It helps measure explosiveness. Robert, I always knew I liked you, man. Robert's great. We're going to wrap it up there. We're at 47 minutes. Dillon, we could do this, I feel like, for hours.
We would do it again soon.
Maybe someday we'll do it for an hour. Let's schedule it. But anyway, on Wisconsin, Dillon, go check out his incredible work, his team's incredible work over at Badger Notes. They do. I can't even. It's incredible, editorial, consistent, unique work. They're awesome. So go check them out as well. On Wisconsin, and we're going to talk tomorrow.